Hey everyone. All right, so back to some type 1 diabetes talk here. I said I'd do a follow-up video a couple of videos ago, and I wanted to wait because I did another C-peptide test, and this one was a non-fasted test because I just wanted to see where I would be compared to all the fasted tests that I've done previously. And I was really hoping for a higher result, and it did not go that way. It actually reversed, and I'll get to that. So, but it was really disappointing. But I'll talk about that in a bit here. But first, I wanted to share just kind of my own calculations as far as the equivalent of C-peptide to units of insulin from a diabetic perspective because I couldn't find anything online that would provide that, which I think is weird because I would think most people who do this test are diabetic. It would be nice to know that. I'm coming up with these calculations definitely based on assumptions. So I could be way off here. This is just what I think is accurate for specifically for myself, and what I come up with kind of falls in line with what I'm seeing as far as how much insulin I have to take specifically during a fast compared to what I had to take previously years ago. And so this first image here, the asterisks at the top are just the normal levels. The first one is the fasting levels of C-peptide. From what I've found online, that 0.78 to 1.89 is really where most people should be in that range, and anything greater than 2.0 might indicate the potential for type 2 diabetes and some insulin resistance. Now, the reference interval that I see on my blood test results that I get is much higher. It listed as 1.1 to 4.4. So I don't know where they're coming up with that because 4.4 seems very high, and everything I found online indicates anything above 2 would not be where you want to be. So I'm not sure where they get their reference interval, but I'm just going with what I see online. Then the second asterisk there is if you do this test not fasted and about an hour after a glucose load, which is essentially what I did in this most recent test that I'll share towards the end of this video. And so obviously it'll be higher because you're producing a normal person would need to produce more insulin. So the range that most people would fall in would be 5 to 12 there based on what I found online. So based on that, I kind of came up with my own numbers. For me specifically, and on average, I'm thinking for most people, if they're fasted, the total amount of insulin from a units perspective, as how we measure it, as diabetes measures it, or as diabetics measure it, as far as what they inject. The initial 24-hour fast period, I'm thinking most people would produce about 15 units of insulin during over the course of those 24 hours. And that falls in line with what I've seen in the multiple fasts that I've done as a type 1 diabetic. That's generally what I started out having to take. Now, if I do that and compare it, and I just picked a midpoint of around 1.5, and I also picked that number just to make the math simple. But assuming that the normal measurement of C-peptide would be 1.5 for a person who's this fasting C-peptide test, you need to fast for 14 hours at least. And C-peptide is also has a 30-minute half-life. So it's really a measurement of the insulin that you're producing very recently when you take that test. But I'm still making the assumption that that's spread out over the course of the day as far as how much total insulin you're taking. So assuming the normal person produces 15 units of insulin, their body produces 15 units of insulin over a 24-hour period, and the normal C-peptide result for a healthy person would be 1.5. That would equate to 1 unit of insulin for every 0.1 nanograms per milliliter of C-peptide. Okay, so based on my results that I've shared in the past here, and I'll share that image now. And just a quick reminder of what C-peptide is. It's just essentially, I'll just refer to it as a byproduct. When your pancreas produces insulin, it also produces C-peptide. So if you're not able to produce any insulin, then you will have no C-peptide in your blood. So this is the best measurement for a diabetic perspective, specifically type 1 diabetic perspective, because you can test for insulin, but it'll detect any insulin that you've injected into your system. So the only way to truly know if your pancreas is able to produce insulin is through a C-peptide test. So here are the results that I already shared. Back in December 2023, I had a C-peptide result of 0.2. April of this year went up to 0.4, and then in August it went up to 0.6. And just based on the estimates that I provided in the previous image, just simply multiply that by 10 to equate to how much insulin my body is producing over the entire 24-hour day during a fast. And so that's 2, 4, and now 6 units total. So that's promising, and I was very happy with this increase. And it also coincides with what I've seen. Specifically when I fast. My first fast was 5 years ago. It was a 9-day fast, and I had to take insulin during the entire 9 days. And the last few days it was a little, very little amount. I can't remember exactly how much, but it was only a couple units, maybe 3. I'm not sure exactly. But that is why and I've shared this previously. I hadn't taken a C-peptide test before. I think the first one I took, I forget already. I think it was in September of 2023, and it was also at 0.2. But I'm pretty sure I was at 0 prior to that, because even last year, or actually prior to last year, during a fast, I didn't have to take insulin for the last, deeper into the fast after days 4 or 5 or so. So that would coincide with me initially not producing any insulin and then increasing it to at least 0.2, to where those last few days of a fast I could produce enough insulin to maintain normal blood sugar levels. So like I said, that coincides. And then more recently, I'm seeing that I can stop taking insulin earlier in a fast. I believe I've shared this before, where normally, over the past few years, the first day I do usually have to take around 15 units. It can range depending on what I eat the previous day. It could be less, it could be more. The second day I usually have to take 10 units. Third day I usually have to take 5, and then for the day 4 maybe I have to take some insulin, but after that usually I can go without insulin for however long I do the fast. And that was pretty consistent for a while, but more recently I'm seeing that I can stop taking insulin much sooner during a fast. And more recently, even starting in day 2, even not having to take insulin. And so that coincides with my more recent result of zero point 0.6, which in my mind equates to 6 total units of insulin throughout the entire day, which would cover that third day of where I used to have to take 5 units, and now I don't have to take any. So that coincides with what I'm seeing. And now the crazy thing is, over the past couple months, I've had to take much more insulin when I eat. But then when I fast, I've shared this, starting on day 2, I don't have to take any insulin. And so that doesn't make sense to me. I was thinking maybe, just the energy is going on in the world, how it results in body aches in some people, different things. Maybe it's part of that, where my insulin resistance is just going up randomly. Maybe it's specific to what I'm just my own body, who knows. And I thought it didn't necessarily have to do with insulin production, just more the insulin sensitivity and or resistance, because it just didn't make sense that I was taking much more insulin than I was used to when I ate, but then when I fasted I could stop by day 2. So that brings me to this most recent C-peptide test I just took and got the results for, where I did eat, and it decreased to 0.4. So very upset about that, because I was really hoping that I had the ability to produce more when I ate. I didn't want to think that 0.6 level was my max capacity and whether I fasted or not. So yeah, it is disappointing, but that's how it goes. Now, the test itself, was it a very controlled test? No, because initially I tried to go in the morning, and so I was, of course, fasting overnight. I woke up, I did take, and that's the other thing. I took insulin so my blood sugars wouldn't go crazy high, but I ate an hour or so before I was planning on getting the test, and I go in and it was busy, and I had to end up scheduling an appointment for later in the day. So I had to come back in the afternoon and kind of redo it and set up. But the thing is, I took a lot of insulin throughout the course of the day, and I took insulin probably 2 to 3 hours prior to actually getting the test. And I take Novolin or insulin, so it's very highly active, really at that 2 to 3 hour mark. So the fact that I had injected insulin in me could possibly be limiting my own insulin production because I have the insulin in me already. Now, that said, I tested my blood sugar directly after the test and it was at 160, which is high. And I would think that that high of a blood sugar would still spur on insulin production within my body. But I really don't know. I don't know how everything is working. Everything's pretty confusing as far as what I'm seeing so far during the course of this whole process. So, like I said, I tried to control it, but it's not very controllable when I need to take insulin to avoid a high blood sugar and still need to eat and hopefully try to spur on insulin production in my own body. I really don't know what the best way to approach that type of test is, a non-fasted C-peptide test. So who knows there? Again, though, I still was very disappointed, not only because it didn't go up to where I was expecting it to, but the fact that it decreased. I know that it can't constantly just go up on a consistent basis. There's going to be a couple steps forward, step back, and I'm anticipating that. This, though, was pretty disappointing for me. And one reason I want to explain as why is because the reason I was hoping to be above 1 or possibly 1.5 is because when I'm trying to look at how long this is going to take. And I'm not saying any of this is good. Now I'll get to that in a little bit. But when I look at my fasted C-peptide levels, I'm being at zero 0.6 and my goal is to be at, around 1.5. Well, I'm, you know, getting there. Like if I'm able to increase my C-peptide by zero 0.2 every few months, then, maybe in about a year, I'll be up to 1.5. That said, when I'm not fasted and I need a C-peptide of, let's say, in a range of around 5, I didn't want the 1.5 to be my max capability of producing. So that means I would have to go even longer if I'm only increasing it by zero 0.2 every couple of months to get the whole way up to eventually get a C-peptide level of 5. I was really hoping that my non-fasted C-peptide level would produce more, would mean that I'm producing more insulin when eating, and that would be at around 1.5, and that would, go up consistently the same as my non-fasted. So it's just more this setting these expectations, not a good thing. That said, I do like expectations aren't overall bad. When they distract me from what's important, they are, and that's what these short-term expectations that I set really do not help me in any way whatsoever. Because one, I'm just making these expectations up. So the fact that I'm setting them based on nothing, it's not helpful in any way. Now, that said, I expect to heal myself of type 1 diabetes, and there's nothing wrong with that expectation. Setting a specific time, that can be a distraction. Setting these specific C-peptide test result goals, that's a distraction. All that does is clutter the mind, essentially make me not be calm, not have a calm mind, not fall into the heart and focus on the process. And this is a realization I had a year ago where I realized then I needed to stop focusing on the results because they only worked as a distraction for me. And I just need to focus on the process, not be bothered by disappointments. Setting expectations does lead to disappointments. That's not meaning all expectations are bad, but the short-term expectations that I set ultimately distract me. They lead to unnecessary disappointment, and it's really important to just focus on the process and not the result. And so again, it's another reminder. I've said this before. I need to be hit over the head multiple times for it to sink in, and so that's just what's happening here. So yes, I will admit it's disappointing, but I guess one plus possibly for the people who are listening that are type 1 diabetic, and obviously it's hard to listen to somebody that you don't know online and whether you can trust them or not. I'm hoping this can kind of show that I'm not going to hide anything. I'm not going to just show only the good things that are happening. I want to show everything that happens during this process. Whether you want to call it good, whether you want to call it bad, I just want to share everything, because it's important that I share the struggles, because when I do heal this, people will go through this the same way, I'm sure, though there's always roadblocks, and so that's pretty important, at least from my perspective, that I need to share everything. So that's the type 1 diabetic video. That I think that's all I got to say. All right, thanks for listening. Bye.